March 19th, 1999. Captain Mike Torres has been fighting fires for 20 years in Iowa City. He's seen devastating house fires that consumed families, car fires on the interstate, industrial accidents at manufacturing plants. He's pulled people from burning buildings and watched flames consume entire city blocks. He's held his breath in smoke-filled rooms and felt walls collapse around him. He knows fire like other people know their heartbeat. But nothing in those 20 years has prepared him for what he's about to find on this ordinary Friday morning near the University of Iowa campus. The apartment building is completely engulfed. Flames are shooting from every window like the building itself is screaming. Heat radiates from the structure in waves that Torres can feel from 50 feet away. Waves that make his eyes water and his skin prickle with warning. Windows are exploding outward, sending showers of glass onto the empty street below like deadly rain. Something about this fire feels wrong, too intense, too deliberate, too hot for a normal residential fire. The kind of fire that someone wanted to burn hot and fast, the kind that consumes evidence. Torres charges through the entrance anyway, because that's what firefighters do. Smoke immediately swallows him whole. He feels his way along scorched walls, his training the only thing guiding him through this hellscape of heat and darkness. Then his gloved hand touches something soft in the hallway. Something that shouldn't be there. A body. Then he finds another one in the back bedroom, positioned deliberately among the debris, like someone had arranged them. This isn't an accidental fire that claimed unfortunate victims. This is something much worse. This is someone using fire to hide the truth. Dr. Patricia Huang, the county medical examiner, delivers news that changes everything about this investigation. Both women were gone before the first flame touched them. No soot in their lungs, no smoke inhalation. They'd been ended by blunt force trauma to their heads, repeated blows from something heavy and brutal. But here's the detail that made her blood run cold. Decomposition rates showed these women had been ended on different days. Think about that for a second. Someone ended one woman, left her body in that apartment to decompose, then came back the next day and ended another woman in the exact same location. Two separate incidents of ending life, 24 hours apart, in the same blood-soaked crime scene. Laura Watson-Dalton, 29 years old, a paramedic from Creston, Iowa, with an infectious laugh and a passion for helping people. She'd come to Iowa City for St. Patrick's Day weekend, visiting her cousin and celebrating with friends. Her driver's license lay beside her charred remains like a calling card from hell. Maria Lehner, 27 years old, an environmental scientist from Belton, Missouri, originally from the tiny town of Norwalk, Wisconsin. She was on a business trip, had an appointment with the Army Reserve Unit. Her hotel room sat empty for days. Her rental car sat abandoned in a downtown parking garage. Two strangers who never should have been in that apartment. Two victims separated by 24 hours of decomposition and one person's cold calculation about how to get away with ending life twice. Detective Steve Duffy spread crime scene photographs across his desk and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Someone had ended Laura Wednesday night, left her body to rot in that apartment, then returned Thursday to end Maria in the same blood-soaked location. The perpetrator felt safe enough to return. The perpetrator had access. The perpetrator thought fire would erase everything. The apartment was officially rented by 3 college students. All 3 claimed they were out of town for spring break. All 3 denied knowing either victim. But someone had a key to that place. Someone had treated their home like a hunting ground. The apartment told its story in ash and blood for anyone patient enough to listen. investigators found a barbell covered in human tissue, brain matter, and blood. The implement used to end these women's lives with brutal, repeated blows. Gasoline residue everywhere. Evidence of amateur arson. The burn patterns revealed someone who understood fire's appetite for destruction but didn't understand its science. Didn't realize that fire reveals as much as it destroys. Duffy methodically sifted through debris with the patience of someone who knows that one small piece of evidence can break a case wide open. In a pile of rubble near the doorway, something glinted in the light. Prescription glasses. The frames were twisted from heat, but the lenses remained mostly intact. None of the victims wore glasses. None of the tenants had vision problems. These glasses belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who'd been in that apartment when the fire started. Then he found it. A cigarette butt, perfectly preserved despite the inferno that had raged through this space. Not stubbed out carefully like someone finishing a smoke. This cigarette had been burning when it hit the carpet. The brand was Marlboro Red. Duffy started piecing together the sequence of events. Someone had lit a cigarette while pouring gasoline throughout the apartment. The invisible vapors had built up in corners and hidden spaces, creating a bomb waiting for ignition. When those fumes reached critical mass and someone provided an ignition source, the apartment became an instant furnace. The explosion had been violent enough to blow a hole through the exterior wall. The glasses had flown off in the blast. The burning cigarette had been ripped from the perpetrator's mouth by the force of superheated air, expanding faster than thought. 1 week later, the college tenants returned from spring break to find more than just fire damage. Electronics were missing. A television, a stereo system, small appliances, anything worth pawning had vanished. Duffy hit the local pawn shops immediately, knowing that criminals almost always make the same mistakes. At Murphy's pawn shop, owner Jim Murphy described a customer who'd come in desperate just 3 days after the fire. The customer had a fresh burn scar across the bridge of his nose, exactly where glasses would rest. He squinted constantly, clearly struggling without vision correction. He seemed jumpy, nervous, needed cash fast. The transaction records led them to Jonathan Lee Memmer. John Memmer, 23 years old, a drifter with no permanent address and no steady job. He was physically capable of working, but chose instead to party and ignore life's responsibilities. A man who survived by charming his way into other people's homes, then robbing them blind. His criminal record showed an escalating pattern of antisocial behavior, burglary, forgery, and a complete disregard for other people's property or safety. Dr. Jennifer Walsh examined the glasses with scientific precision. Using a lensometer, an instrument that measures the exact refractive power of lenses, she determined the prescription strength. The glasses required correction for severe nearsightedness, plus an unusual astigmatism that affected how light entered the eye at specific angles. The prescription was distinctive enough to be almost like a fingerprint. Records from lens crafters downtown confirmed these glasses belonged to Jonathan Memmer. The prescription matched perfectly, down to that unusual astigmatism correction. The odds against coincidence were astronomical. These were his glasses, and they'd been in that apartment when the fire started. DNA analyst Tom Rodriguez extracted genetic material from the cigarette filter found at the scene. The saliva provided enough cellular material for a complete genetic profile. Every marker matched John Memmer's DNA on file from his previous arrests. Memmer had been in that apartment. Memmer had been smoking while the fire started. The science was undeniable. But criminalist Beth Bessman made the discovery that would seal Memmer's fate forever. She was processing Laura Watson-Dalton's leather jacket using cyanoacrylate fuming, a technique that makes fingerprints visible. What she found was unprecedented. A perfect shoe impression pressed into the leather material of the jacket. Not just any impression, but one with enough detail to identify the exact shoe. The footprint matched Jonathan Memmer's size 11 work boots exactly. Same tread pattern, same wear marks, same distinctive heel damage where the rubber had worn unevenly. But there was more. A reddish-brown stain on the sole of that boot. Testing confirmed it was blood. Maria Lehner's blood, carried from one victim to another on the bottom of Memmer's shoe. Think about what that means. Memmer had stepped in Maria's blood, then stepped on Laura's jacket, which meant he'd been with both victims. The forensic evidence painted a picture that no lawyer could argue away. The timeline crystallized with horrifying clarity as witnesses came forward. Both Wednesday and Thursday nights, Jonathan Memmer had prowled Iowa City's bar district like a predator hunting prey. A tall, unkempt man targeting women who were drinking alone or separated from their friends. Laura Watson-Dalton sat at Murphy's Tavern on Wednesday night, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. She'd been celebrating with friends who'd left early. She was tired, slightly intoxicated, and trusting when Memmer approached with practiced charm. Multiple witnesses described their interaction as friendly and normal. He was funny, engaging, seemed like a regular guy. When he suggested going to a party at his friend's apartment, Laura saw no red flags. She followed him into the night, into the apartment where she would suffer a brutal ending from blunt force trauma when she rejected his advances or tried to leave. 24 hours later, with Laura's body decomposing in the bedroom, Jonathan Memmer returned to the same hunting ground. He had no money. He'd stolen everything he could from the apartment the night before and pawned it for cash. Now he was back in the bars, looking for another victim, unbelievably brazen in his predatory behavior. Maria Lehner stopped at Cedar Ridge Bar Thursday night, March 18th, for a nightcap after a frustrating day. She'd driven from Cedar Rapids where she had an afternoon appointment. She was supposed to have a meeting in Iowa City the next morning. She'd never make it to that meeting. The same approach worked again. The same practiced charm, the same invitation to a party, the same deadly destination. When Maria followed Memmer back to that apartment, Laura's body was already there, already decomposing, already a testament to what Memmer was capable of. Friday morning, March 19th, arrived gray and cold. Inside the apartment, the evidence of two endings lingered in every corner. Laura had been decomposing for 2 days. Maria's fresh body lay in the back bedroom. Jonathan Memmer moved through his makeshift morgue with the efficiency of someone loading a shopping cart at a grocery store. The television went first. Its weight was familiar from countless previous thefts. Then the stereo system, small appliances, anything that might bring $20 or $30 at a pawn shop. Each trip to the shopping cart took him past the bodies, past the blood, past the evidence of his escalating violence. His criminal career had been built on theft and manipulation. Ending life was new territory, but he'd crossed that line twice now. But the bodies presented a problem he'd never faced in his life of petty crime. Laura's ending had been unplanned rage when she tried to leave, when she rejected his advances, when she threatened to expose him for whatever he'd done or tried to do. Maria's ending was cold necessity. She could identify him. She could place him at the scene. She could destroy the fiction he'd built around himself. 2 gone women meant serious prison time, possibly the ultimate penalty. Memmer considered fire as the perfect solution. He'd seen it in movies. Flames consumed evidence. Heat obliterated DNA. Fire melted fingerprints. It reduced complex crime scenes to charred rubble that told no stories. At least, that's what he thought. He found the gasoline container in the utility closet, a 5-gallon plastic jug the tenants used for their lawn equipment. The chemical smell hit him immediately as he unscrewed the cap. He poured liberally throughout the apartment, soaking carpet and splashing walls with the enthusiasm of someone who understood fire's destructive appetite, but not its volatile science. The apartment filled with invisible death as gasoline vapors, heavier than air, settled into corners and accumulated in hidden spaces. They created a bomb waiting for ignition. Physics was preparing to demonstrate why amateurs shouldn't play with professional tools. Mehmer understood fire's hunger, but not its science, not the way it could betray him. He lit a Marlboro Red and took a satisfied drag, believing he was moments from the perfect crime. The nicotine calmed his nerves, made him feel clever and in control. He was holding a detonator in a room full of explosives, and he had no idea. The apartment became a furnace faster than human thought. Superheated air expanded violently with the force of a small bomb. The explosion lifted Mehmer off his feet and hurled him against buckling walls. His glasses flew across the room, clattering into debris that would convict him. The burning cigarette was ripped from his mouth by the shockwave, landing on Laura's jacket like evidence gift-wrapped for investigators. Flames seared his nose where his glasses had been, marking him permanently with a distinctive burn that would help investigators identify him days later. As he stumbled through smoke, half-blind and disoriented, Jonathan Mehmer had no idea he'd just created the perfect crime scene for prosecutors. Every piece of evidence was preserved, every mistake documented, every lie already exposed by science. At trial, Jonathan Mehmer sat wearing 2 fresh teardrop tattoos beneath his right eye. Prison ink he'd gotten after being charged with ending life. In prison culture, those tattoos mean only one thing: you've ended someone's life. Corrections officers testified that Mehmer didn't have those tattoos when he was first arrested. He got them while in jail awaiting trial, essentially advertising his crimes on his face. The forensic evidence formed an unbreakable chain of guilt. The eyeglasses proved he was there when the fire started. The DNA on the cigarette proved he'd been smoking in that apartment. The footprint on Laura's jacket proved he'd stepped on her belongings. The blood on his shoe proved he'd walked through Maria's blood and then stepped on Laura's jacket, connecting him to both victims in a way that couldn't be explained away. Witnesses testified about seeing Mehmer with both women on the nights they disappeared. The pawn shop owner identified Mehmer as the man who'd sold stolen electronics from the apartment days after the fire. Cellmates testified that Mehmer had bragged about the endings, talking about what he'd done with disturbing casualness. Mehmer took the stand in his own defense and claimed he was innocent. He admitted breaking into the apartment and stealing the stereo, but denied ending anyone. He denied using gasoline to set the bodies on fire. He testified he'd only briefly seen Laura on March 17th and never met Maria at all. Prosecutors tore his testimony apart. They got him to admit he'd lied to witnesses about various things. The burn mark on his nose that witnesses noticed? Mehmer claimed he got scratched playing basketball. No medical evidence supported that. His presence at multiple bars on both nights? Just coincidence, he claimed. The forensic evidence connecting him to both victims and the crime scene? All explainable in his version of events. The jury didn't buy it. On October 22nd, 2001, they found Jonathan Lee Mehmer guilty on 2 counts of first-degree ending life. He said nothing as the verdict was read. His family rushed from the courtroom and refused to comment to reporters. November 21st, 2001. Sentencing day. District Judge David Remley prepared to hand down the sentence everyone knew was coming. 2 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. But first, the victim impact statements. The families of Laura Watson-Dalton and Maria Lehner would finally have their chance to confront the man who'd taken their loved ones. As family members stood to speak, Jonathan Memmer stood up and walked out of the courtroom. Let that sink in. The man convicted of brutally ending 2 women couldn't even face their families when they described the pain he'd caused. Mike Beeson, Laura's brother-in-law, shouted after him, "You coward bastard!" Johnson County Attorney J. Patrick White, who prosecuted the case, told reporters he'd never seen a defendant duck out on victim statements in such a major case. It was the final act of cowardice from a man who'd shown no respect for human life. Judge Remley sentenced Memmer in his absence to consecutive life terms in prison without parole. When Memmer was brought back, he had the audacity to criticize the judge. "When you wake up each morning, remember this. I was innocent. I'm still innocent," Memmer told Remley. "See if you can live with yourself the way you handled this case." The judge responded with words that captured everything about this tragedy. "Your ending of Laura Ann Dalton and Maria Therese Lehner was absolutely senseless. Your extreme brutality and total lack of respect for human life is evident in everything you did." Remley also ordered Memmer to pay $150,000 each to the victims' families. Not that it would bring Laura and Maria back. Not that it would heal the wounds he'd created. Michelle Lehner, Maria's sister, spoke through tears about losing her best friend. "We were the best of friends. After March 19th, 1999, that all changed, after Memmer brutally ended my sister's life. You took away my mother's youngest child. You came along and ended her baby, the baby of our family. Maria would have turned 30 that very day." Jim Watson, Laura's father, talked about the pain of losing his daughter, a young woman who dedicated her life to saving others as a paramedic. The trial had left him emotionally spent, sitting through days of testimony about how his daughter had suffered, how she'd been found, what had been done to her. Here's what happened to everyone involved in this case, and some of it might surprise you. Jonathan Lee Memmer, now approximately 48 years old, remains in an Iowa state prison serving 2 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. He's been incarcerated for over 23 years, and he's still claiming he's innocent. In 2004, Memmer filed for post-conviction relief on 13 claims of ineffective assistance of counsel. He argued his attorneys didn't properly defend him, didn't object to certain evidence, didn't challenge the blood evidence aggressively enough. The post-conviction relief court denied and dismissed his application. In 2010, Memmer made another appeal for a new trial at the Johnson County Courthouse. He testified that his attorneys didn't follow the strategy they'd laid out, specifically concerning the blood evidence found on his shoe. His attorneys had told him they needed to attack the blood evidence, because without it, the state couldn't have brought him to trial. But they didn't challenge it effectively, in Memmer's view. His attorney, Clemens Erdahl, took the stand and explained that he'd actually lined up a DNA expert, Dr. Peter DeForest, to investigate possible cross-contamination of the blood evidence. When the crime lab first examined Memmer's shoe, one criminalist didn't see the blood stain. Another criminalist found it later when the shoe was sent back for footprint analysis. That raised questions about handling procedures. But here's the problem for Memmer. Dr. DeForest examined the lab's procedures and concluded they'd done a good job. The blood analysis was sound. There was no reason to challenge it because the science was correct. Erdahl didn't put DeForest on the stand because he didn't want prosecutors to know that even the defense's expert thought the evidence was solid. The Iowa Court of Appeals upheld Memmer's convictions in 2012 and again denied his appeals. As recently as August 2024, The Iowa Court of Appeals rejected yet another attempt by Memmer to get a new trial. He argued his sentence was illegal and that his defense lawyer had failed him. The court disagreed. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was just. Jonathan Memmer will die in prison. Iowa doesn't have parole for life sentences. He will spend the rest of his life squinting through replacement glasses, remembering the night he thought he was clever enough to commit the perfect crime. Laura Watson-Dalton's father, Jim Watson, has had to live with the loss of his daughter for over 25 years now. Laura was a paramedic who spent her career saving lives. She came to Iowa City for a fun St. Patrick's Day weekend with friends and family. She never imagined that accepting an invitation to a party would cost her everything. Maria Lehner's family, including her sister Michelle and her cousin Jeff Sullivan, who worked as a detective, waited patiently for nearly a year before charges were filed. Jeff Sullivan understood that building a strong case takes time. If it takes a while to make sure you've got a good, strong case, I'd rather see that and be patient than going in by the tail of your shirt and not being able to have a strong case, he told reporters. The family's patience paid off with a conviction that ensured Memmer would never walk free. The 3 college students who rented that apartment returned from spring break to find their home had become a crime scene. They'd been studying abroad and on vacation, completely unaware that someone had used their space to end 2 women's lives. They cooperated fully with investigators and were never suspects. The case became a featured episode of Forensic Files titled Deadly Charm, Season 8, Episode 29, showcasing how multiple forensic disciplines came together to solve what could have been a perfect crime. The glasses, the DNA, the footprint analysis, the blood evidence, all of it combined to prove beyond any doubt what Jonathan Memmer had done. What keeps me awake thinking about this case isn't just the brutality of what happened. It's the calculated nature of it. Jonathan Memmer ended Laura Watson-Dalton on Wednesday night, then went back to the exact same apartment on Thursday night and ended Maria Lehner. 2 separate incidents of ending life, 24 hours apart, in the same location. He was so confident, so sure of himself, that he returned to the scene of one ending to commit another. And when he finally decided to destroy the evidence with fire, he did it with such amateur incompetence that he created the perfect crime scene for investigators. His glasses flew off. His cigarette landed on evidence. His burn scar identified him. Every mistake he made became another link in the chain that led to his conviction. Laura Watson-Dalton was 29 years old. She'd spent 6 months working as a paramedic in Creston, Iowa, saving lives and helping people in their worst moments. She came from Omaha originally, was described by everyone who knew her as outgoing, caring, someone you wanted to be around. She had a boyfriend who was completely baffled when she disappeared. She had family who loved her. She had a future. Maria Lehner was 27 years old. She grew up in the tiny town of Norwalk, Wisconsin, population 560, where everyone knew everyone. She'd gone to college, become an environmental scientist, moved to Belton, Missouri for work. She was in Iowa for a business appointment with the Army Reserve. She'd checked into her hotel, but never made it to her meeting the next morning. Her sister Michelle called her their best friend. March 19th, the day they found her body, was the day after what would have been her 28th birthday. 2 women who had everything to live for. 2 women who made the fatal mistake of trusting a predator who'd perfected his charm while hiding his brutality. The case shows us something important about forensic science. Jonathan Memmer thought fire would destroy everything. He thought heat would obliterate evidence, that flames would consume the truth. He was completely wrong. Fire preserved his cigarette. The explosion scattered his glasses. His amateur arson created the very evidence that convicted him. The glasses proved he was there. The DNA proved he smoked that cigarette. The footprint proved he stepped on Laura's jacket. The blood proved he carried evidence from one victim to another. Every single piece of forensic evidence pointed to one person, Jonathan Lee Memmer. And here's what really matters. He's never getting out. No parole, no second chances, no walking free. He'll die behind bars, still claiming he's innocent, still refusing to take responsibility for ending 2 women's lives with brutal, calculated violence. The families of Laura and Maria can take some comfort in knowing their loved ones' cases were solved, that justice was served, that the man who took their daughters and sisters from them will never hurt anyone else. But that comfort is cold. It doesn't bring Laura back to her father. It doesn't give Michelle another day with her best friend. If you ever find yourself thinking about Laura Watson-Dalton and Maria Lehner, remember them not as victims found in a burned apartment, but as young women who lived full lives before they met Jonathan Memmer. Remember Laura as a paramedic who dedicated her career to saving lives. Remember Maria as an environmental scientist working to make the world better. And remember that sometimes the perfect crime is impossible, because science reveals what fire can't hide, and justice finds what predators think they've buried in ash.